If you eat that, you're going to die. The little girl's voice cut through the restaurant so sharply that every conversation around us stopped mid-sentence. Even the piano player near the bar missed a note. I looked up from polishing wine glasses behind the service station and saw her standing beside table 14, tiny hands clenched into fists, blue eyes wide with terror as she stared at the dessert in front of Damien Moretti. Oh God! My stomach dropped instantly. Lily, I whispered under my breath, already moving toward her as fast as I could without slipping on the marble floor. The entire restaurant had gone silent. Not normal silent either. Heavy silent. Dangerous silent. The kind that made your skin cold. Damien Moretti slowly lowered the fork in his hand onto the edge of the plate. Calm. Controlled. Too controlled. I had worked at Bella Vita for almost 11 months, and everybody knew who he was even if nobody dared say it too loudly. The expensive charcoal suit. The silver watch worth more than my car. The men around him who never smiled and always watched the exits. Power followed him into every room like a shadow. And now my 6-year-old daughter had just shouted at him in the middle of Manhattan's most exclusive Italian restaurant during peak dinner rush. I'm so sorry, I blurted immediately as I reached Lily and grabbed her shoulders gently. She didn't mean, Mom, Lily whispered, trembling now, don't let him eat it. Damien's gray eyes shifted toward her slowly. Not annoyed. Not angry. Somehow worse. Interested. The air around table 14 tightened instantly. One of the men beside him reached for the plate, but Damien lifted a single finger without looking away from Lily. The man froze immediately. Nobody moved after that. Why? Damien asked quietly. His voice wasn't loud, but the entire restaurant heard it anyway. Lily swallowed hard. I could feel her shaking beneath my hands. The man with the cake, she whispered. He has the snake ring. Something changed in Damien's expression. Tiny. Almost invisible. But I saw it. So did the men sitting around him. One of them straightened instantly in his chair while another scanned the restaurant. Near the kitchen entrance. My pulse started hammering so hard it hurt. Lily, I whispered carefully, what snake ring? But she kept staring at Damien instead. The same one, she said softly. The one Daddy said bad people wear. My blood turned to ice. No. No, no, no. Not here. Not now. I hadn't heard anyone mention my husband in almost 4 years. Not since the funeral. Not since the late-night phone call that changed everything about our lives. Damien leaned back slowly in his chair, eyes never leaving Lily's face. For one strange second, he didn't look dangerous anymore. He looked shocked. Then one of his security men stepped forward and murmured something into his ear. Damien's jaw tightened. Lock the kitchen doors, he said calmly. The restaurant erupted instantly. Chairs scraped across marble. Staff exchanged panicked looks. Somewhere behind me, a woman gasped. I grabbed Lily's hand immediately. We're leaving, I whispered. But before I could take a single step, Damien Moretti stood up from the table and looked directly at me for the first time that night. No, he said quietly. You're not leaving yet. Nobody argued with Damien Moretti. I realized that immediately from the way the entire restaurant moved the second he spoke. The kitchen doors slammed shut somewhere behind me. 2 men in dark suits appeared near the front entrance while another quietly guided confused customers back toward their tables with the kind of politeness that somehow felt threatening anyway. My pulse would not slow down. Lily pressed against my side, clutching my hand so tightly her tiny fingers hurt. Mom, she whispered, voice trembling, I want to go home. I know, baby. I crouched quickly in front of her, brushing loose blonde curls away from her face. Everything is okay. It was a lie. She knew it. I knew it. And judging by the expression on Damien's face across the dining room, he knew it too. One of the waiters emerged nervously from the kitchen carrying another dessert tray, but the moment Damien looked at him, the poor guy nearly stopped breathing. "Who served this table?" Damien asked calmly. No shouting. No anger. Somehow that made it worse. The restaurant manager rushed forward immediately, sweating through his expensive gray suit. "Sir, there must be some misunderstanding. Anthony prepared the dessert personally. He has worked here 6 years." Damien's eyes shifted slowly toward a young server near the wine station. Mid-20s. Pale. Nervous. His hands were shaking so badly he almost dropped the tray he carried. And then I saw it too. A silver ring shaped like a coiled snake wrapped around his finger. My stomach turned instantly. Lily buried her face against my arm. "That is him," she whispered. The young waiter froze. Every color drained from his face. One of Damien's men stepped closer to him immediately, but Damien lifted his hand again. "Do not touch him," he said quietly. Then he looked at Lily. "How do you know that ring?" I opened my mouth instantly. "She does not know anything. She is 6 years old." Damien ignored me completely. His attention never left my daughter. "Lily," he said, voice calmer now, "who told you about the snake ring?" She hesitated. I could feel her heart pounding through her little jacket. "My daddy." The silence after that answer felt endless. For years. For years since Lily had mentioned him out loud. I swallowed hard and looked away. My husband, Daniel Carter, had died in what police called a highway accident outside Newark. Closed case. No investigation. No answers. Just a folded flag and sympathy cards that stopped arriving after 2 weeks. But the night before he died, he had locked every door in our apartment and sat beside Lily's bed for almost an hour whispering things I could never fully hear. At the time I thought he was scared. Looking back now, I realized he had been preparing her. Damien slowly loosened his tie, eyes unreadable. "Interesting," he murmured softly. Then his gaze shifted toward the terrified waiter again. "Take the ring off." The young man blinked rapidly. "Sir, I do not know what this is about." "Take the ring off." His voice stayed low. Controlled. But the entire room felt colder somehow. The waiter's breathing turned uneven. For 1 second I thought he might run. Instead, he slowly pulled the ring from his finger and placed it onto the white tablecloth beside the untouched dessert plate. Damien stared at it without moving. Then something strange happened. One of the older men sitting beside him suddenly stood up so fast his chair nearly tipped backward. "That symbol disappeared 12 years ago," he said quietly. Damien did not answer immediately. His eyes remained fixed on the ring. "Apparently," he said after a long silence, "it did not disappear at all." Then for the first time that night, he looked directly at me with something colder than anger. Recognition. Recognition hit me harder than fear. Because the way Damien Moretti looked at me in that moment told me one terrifying thing. He knew my husband's name before I ever said it. My throat tightened instantly. "Mom," Lily whispered softly beside me, tugging my sleeve, "I do not like this place anymore." Neither did I. The restaurant suddenly felt too small. Too quiet. Rain hammered against the tall windows overlooking Manhattan while candlelight flickered across white tablecloths and untouched wine glasses. Somewhere near the kitchen, a glass shattered. Nobody reacted. Damien kept staring at me like he was trying to solve a puzzle he had buried years ago. "Emily Carter," he said finally, calm and precise. "Your husband was Daniel Carter." It was not a question. My heart stopped. I pulled Lily closer immediately. "How do you know my husband?" For the first time since this nightmare began, something human crossed Damien's face. Not warmth exactly. Something heavier. Regret maybe. One of the older men near him shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Damien, he warned quietly. Damien ignored him completely. His gray eyes stayed locked on mine. Daniel worked in financial operations for a shipping company in Brooklyn, he said. 3 years before he died, he started investigating offshore accounts connected to a group called Vipera. My knees nearly gave out beneath me. Daniel had used that exact word once. One single time. I remembered it because it sounded strange coming from him. We had been standing in our tiny queen's kitchen after midnight while Lily slept down the hall. He had looked exhausted. Pale. Scared. If anything happens to me, he had whispered, you take Lily and disappear. At the time, I thought stress was breaking him. I had no idea he was trying to save us. You are wrong, I said quickly, though my voice barely sounded steady anymore. My husband worked in accounting. Damien leaned slightly forward. Your husband found something he was never supposed to see. The room went cold. And now, he continued softly, your daughter recognizes a symbol connected to men who should have disappeared over a decade ago. I looked down at Lily. She had gone very quiet. Too quiet. Her small fingers clung tightly to the fabric of my uniform apron while her eyes stayed fixed on the silver snake ring resting beside Damien's untouched dessert plate. Baby, I whispered carefully, when did Daddy talk to you about the ring? Lily swallowed hard. The night before he went away. Pain moved across my chest so sharply I could barely breathe. Damien noticed. Of course he noticed. Men like him probably noticed everything. He told me, Lily continued softly, if I ever saw that symbol again, I had to stay away from the bad men. One of Damien's security men suddenly crossed the restaurant quickly and bent toward him. We checked the kitchen cameras, he murmured quietly. Damien's expression darkened instantly. And? The waiter entered through the employee hallway 10 minutes before his shift started. Nobody recognizes him. The fake waiter closed his eyes briefly like he already knew the game was over. My pulse began racing again. I am taking my daughter home, I said immediately. Whatever this is has nothing to do with us. Damien looked at me for a long moment before answering. Emily, he said quietly, a man just tried to poison me inside a room full of witnesses. He paused. And your daughter identified the symbol connected to the people behind it. Fear crawled slowly up my spine. What does that mean? I asked softly. Damien's eyes shifted toward Lily. Then back to me. It means, he said calmly, you were safer before she spoke. The drive home felt wrong from the moment we left the restaurant. Rain streaked across the windshield in silver lines while Manhattan blurred past outside my old Honda Civic. Lily sat unusually quiet in the back seat clutching her stuffed rabbit against her chest, staring out the window like she was afraid to blink. I kept checking the rearview mirror every few seconds. Not because I wanted to. Because I could not stop. A black SUV had followed us since 47th Street. Same headlights. Same distance. Never too close. Never too far. Mom, Lily whispered softly after 10 minutes, they are still behind us. My grip tightened on the steering wheel. Do not look back, baby. But I looked again anyway. The SUV stayed there, smooth and silent against the wet streets of Queens like some giant shadow refusing to disappear. I hated that part of me felt relieved. The other part felt terrified. By the time I parked outside our apartment building, my nerves were stretched so tight I could barely breathe normally. The building looked exactly the same as always. Old brick. Flickering hallway light. Broken mailbox near the entrance nobody ever fixed. Normal. Ordinary. Safe. Except it did not feel safe anymore. Not after tonight. Not after Damien Moretti said we were safer before Lily spoke. I hurried Lily upstairs while rain soaked through my thin jacket. Third floor. Apartment 3B. Home. The second we stepped inside, Lily ran straight to the couch and wrapped herself in the old yellow blanket my mother knitted before she passed away. I locked the door immediately. Then checked it twice. Then the windows. Then the chain lock again. My hands would not stop shaking. Mom. Lily's small voice made me turn around. Are the bad men coming? The question hit harder than anything Damien had said all night. I forced myself to smile and crossed the tiny living room quickly before kneeling in front of her. No one is coming here, I whispered gently. You are safe with me. Another lie. I was becoming very good at lying to my daughter. Lily studied my face for a long moment like children do when they already know adults are hiding things. Then she reached into the pocket of her little pink hoodie and pulled something out slowly. My stomach dropped instantly. The silver snake ring. Lily. My voice barely worked. Where did you get that? The man. Dropped it, she whispered. Nobody saw. Panic rushed through me so fast it made my chest hurt. I grabbed the ring carefully between two fingers like it might burn me. Up close, the symbol looked even worse. Detailed silver scales wrapped around a tiny black stone shaped like an eye. I had seen that symbol before. Not clearly. Just flashes. Papers Daniel hid inside our closet. A photograph he deleted too quickly when I walked into the room. A late-night argument on the phone where he kept saying the same sentence over and over. I want out. My breathing turned uneven. Suddenly the apartment felt too quiet. Then came the knock at the door. 3 slow knocks. Controlled. Heavy. Lily immediately scooted backward against the couch cushions. My heart slammed against my ribs. Nobody visited us this late. Nobody. I stood slowly and moved toward the door without making a sound. Another knock followed. Calm. Patient. I looked through the peephole and froze instantly. Damien Moretti stood alone outside apartment 3B wearing a dark wool coat damp with rain, one hand in his pocket, the hallway light casting shadows across his sharp features. He looked less like a man standing outside my apartment and more like trouble itself had finally found my address. Emily, he said quietly through the door. Open it. I should not have opened the door. Every survival instinct I had screamed against it. But something about Damien Moretti standing alone in that dim hallway unsettled me in a different way. Men like him did not come personally unless something had already gone very wrong. I kept the chain lock on and opened the door only 2 inches. How did you find us? I asked immediately. Damien glanced once at the old hallway carpet beneath his shoes before looking back at me. Emily, he said calmly, you worked in a restaurant I own. My stomach dropped. Of course he owned it. Men like him probably owned half the city without anyone realizing it. Rainwater darkened the shoulders of his black coat while distant thunder rolled outside the building. He looked exhausted now. Not physically. Emotionally. Like tonight had dragged old ghosts back into the light. You need to leave, I whispered quickly. My daughter is scared. Damien's eyes shifted briefly past me toward the apartment interior. Softer this time somehow. Your daughter is the reason I am here. Before I could answer, footsteps echoed downstairs in the building lobby. Fast. Multiple people. Damien's expression changed instantly. Every trace of softness disappeared beneath cold calculation. Open the door, he said quietly. Now. Fear rushed through me. What is happening? Another sound followed. The front entrance downstairs slamming open hard enough to rattle the old building walls. Lily gasped softly behind me. Damien stepped closer to the door, voice dropping lower. Emily. Something in his tone made my blood run cold. Not panic. Certainty. I unlocked the chain immediately. Damien entered the apartment in one smooth movement and closed the door behind him quietly. The entire space suddenly felt smaller with him inside it. Too small for his presence. Too small for the danger that seemed to follow him everywhere. Lily stared at him from the couch, clutching her stuffed rabbit tighter against her chest. Damien looked at her for one long second before kneeling slightly so he appeared less intimidating. "Do you still have the ring?" he asked softly. My head snapped toward Lily. "You told him?" She nodded nervously and slowly pointed toward the kitchen counter where I had left it wrapped inside a paper towel. Damien stood immediately and crossed the apartment without another word. He unfolded the towel carefully, staring at the silver snake symbol beneath the dim kitchen light. His jaw tightened. "I was hoping I was wrong," he murmured quietly. "Wrong about what?" I asked. Damien looked toward me slowly. "The men connected to this ring were erased 12 years ago." "Erased?" I repeated uneasily. "By who?" His gray eyes met mine. "By me." Silence swallowed the apartment. Even the rain outside seemed quieter suddenly. Lily climbed off the couch and walked carefully toward us, small sock-covered feet silent against the old hardwood floor. "Daddy said the snake people hurt families," she whispered. Damien looked down at her. Something painful flickered across his face before disappearing again. "Your father was trying to protect you," he said quietly. My chest tightened instantly hearing someone speak about Daniel like that. Not like an accident victim. Like a man who knew something dangerous. Then Damien reached inside his coat pocket and placed a small photograph onto the kitchen counter. I froze the second I saw it. Daniel. Standing beside another man near a shipping dock at night. Both looking younger. Stressed. Afraid. My breathing stopped. "Where did you get this?" I whispered. Damien did not answer immediately. Instead he looked toward the apartment window overlooking the street below. "Because your husband came to me 3 days before he died," he said softly. "And begged me to keep you and Lily hidden." The words did not feel real. They hung in the middle of my tiny kitchen while rain battered the apartment windows hard enough to make the glass tremble. Daniel came to him. Daniel knew him. My husband had stood in the same room as Damien Moretti before he died, and somehow I had never known. I stared at the photograph on the counter again. Daniel looked exhausted in it. Thinner than I remembered. The shadows under his eyes deeper. Fear sat on his face like a weight he could not put down. "No," I whispered automatically. "Daniel hated men like you." Damien did not react to the insult. He simply folded the photograph once and slid it back into his coat pocket carefully. "Your husband hated what I represented," he said quietly. "There is a difference." Lily looked between us silently, confusion written all over her small face. She hated when adults spoke in half-truths. Children always noticed that faster than anyone else. "Daddy was scared," she whispered softly. Damien looked at her for a long moment before nodding once. "Yes," he admitted. "He was." My chest tightened painfully. Daniel had spent months pretending everything was fine before the accident. Smiling through dinner. Kissing Lily goodnight. Going to work every morning wearing the same navy tie while slowly drowning in secrets I never understood. And now this man standing in my apartment was casually unraveling 4 years of lies in less than 10 minutes. What did Daniel find? I asked quietly. Damien walked toward the window overlooking the wet Queen Street below. Black SUVs still sat parked outside the building beneath the flickering streetlights. Watching. Waiting. Vipera was not just a criminal organization, he said carefully. It was a financial network hidden behind shipping companies, charities, political donations. Men with power protecting other men with power. He paused briefly. Daniel discovered money disappearing through accounts connected to people who should have been dead. Goosebumps rose along my arms. And he told you? Damien nodded once. 3 days before the accident, he came to me carrying files. My stomach twisted instantly. Why would he trust you? A bitter smile crossed Damien's face for the first time. Not warm. Tired. Because I was the one trying to destroy Vipera 12 years ago. Silence settled over the apartment again. Somewhere downstairs, a siren echoed through the rain-soaked streets before fading into the distance. Lily slowly climbed onto one of the kitchen chairs and hugged her rabbit against her chest. Did Daddy know bad people would come back? She asked quietly. Damien's expression softened slightly when he looked at her. I think your father hoped they never would. Hope. That word hurt the most. Because Daniel had died believing his family would finally be safe. And tonight proved he was wrong. Suddenly headlights flashed across the apartment walls from outside. Damien turned toward the window instantly, every muscle in his body tightening. One of his phones vibrated inside his coat pocket. He answered immediately without taking his eyes off the street. Talk. The voice on the other end spoke too quietly for me to understand, but Damien's face darkened with every second. How long ago? He asked sharply. Another pause. Then he looked directly at me. Understood. He ended the call slowly. My pulse started racing again. What happened? Damien slipped the phone back into his coat. The waiter from the restaurant disappeared during transport. Fear crashed through me immediately. What does that mean? Damien stepped away from the window and looked first at Lily, then at me. It means whoever sent him already knows he failed. The apartment suddenly felt freezing cold despite the radiator rattling beside the kitchen sink. And I whispered carefully. Damien's gray eyes held mine steadily. And now they know your daughter recognized the ring. I did not realize how exhausted I was until Lily fell asleep against my shoulder an hour later. The apartment had gone strangely quiet after Damien's phone call. Too quiet. The kind of silence that made every tiny sound feel important. Rain tapped softly against the windows now instead of pounding. The old radiator hissed beside the couch. Somewhere downstairs, a neighbor's television played muffled late-night commercials through thin apartment walls. Ordinary sounds. Normal sounds. But nothing about tonight felt normal anymore. Lily's breathing had finally slowed into sleep while I sat beside her on the couch stroking her hair gently. Every few minutes she twitched slightly like she was still trapped inside bad dreams. Damien stood near the kitchen window the entire time, speaking quietly with men downstairs through an earpiece hidden beneath his collar. Watching the street. Watching everything. He barely moved. I hated how safe that made me feel. You should sleep for a few hours, he said suddenly without turning around. I almost laughed. You bring danger into my apartment and now you want me to sleep? Damien glanced back at me over his shoulder. The danger was already here, Emily. The worst part was hearing the truth in his voice. I looked away first. My tiny apartment suddenly felt embarrassingly small with him inside it. Second-hand furniture. Peeling paint near the ceiling. Lily's crayons scattered across the coffee table beside overdue electric bills I had forgotten to hide before opening the door earlier. Damien noticed all of it. Of course he did. Men like him probably survived by noticing details other people missed. Daniel paid your rent anonymously twice after he died, Damien said quietly. My head snapped toward him instantly. What? He turned fully this time, loosening the cufflinks on his shirt with slow controlled movements. You thought the landlord gave extensions because he felt sorry for you. I stared at him speechless. Because that was exactly what I thought. 2 months after Daniel died, when I was drowning in hospital bills and funeral costs, our landlord suddenly stopped threatening eviction. He even lowered the rent for 6 months. I used to call him a miracle. Daniel left instructions, Damien continued calmly. If anything happened to him, certain accounts would release money slowly over time so you would not suspect where it came from. My chest tightened painfully. Even dead, Daniel had still been trying to protect us. Tears burned behind my eyes before I forced them away quickly. Damien noticed that too. He noticed everything. Why are you telling me this now? I asked quietly. For the first time since entering my apartment, Damien hesitated. Tiny. Barely visible. Because your husband trusted me with his family, he said softly. And I failed him once already. The word settled heavily between us. Failed him. Could not save him. Failed him. Before I could ask what that meant, headlights suddenly flashed across the apartment walls again. Different this time. Faster. Damien moved instantly toward the window. His entire posture changed in less than a second. Sharp. Alert. Dangerous. Stay here, he ordered quietly. He pulled the curtain aside just enough to look down at the street below. I stood carefully without waking Lily. What is it? Damien did not answer immediately. Downstairs, car doors slammed shut one after another outside the building. Not his men this time. I could tell from the look on his face. Cold. Calculating. Damien, I whispered, pulse racing again. Then someone started climbing the stairs. Slow footsteps. Deliberate. Getting closer to apartment 3B while the hallway light outside flickered weakly beneath the door. Damien reached inside his coat calmly and looked directly at me. Take Lily into the bedroom, he said quietly. Now. I moved before my brain fully caught up with what was happening. I scooped Lily carefully into my arms, trying not to wake her as footsteps echoed closer outside apartment 3B. Slow. Unhurried. Whoever was coming upstairs was not afraid. That terrified me more than anything else tonight. Lily stirred softly against my shoulder. Mom, she whispered sleepily. It is okay, baby, I lied again. Just stay quiet for me. Damien stood near the front door completely still now, head tilted slightly as he listened to the hallway beyond it. The soft yellow kitchen light carved sharp shadows across his face, making him look less human and more like something built for survival. Calm under pressure. Cold under fear. I hated how much safer that made me feel. Another step outside. Closer. Then silence. The hallway went completely still. My pulse pounded so loudly I could barely hear anything else. Damien looked toward me without moving. Bedroom, he mouthed silently. I carried Lily quickly down the narrow hallway toward my room, heart racing so hard it hurt. The apartment suddenly seemed impossibly fragile. Thin walls. Weak locks. Old windows. The kind of place danger could walk into far too easily. I had just reached the bedroom doorway when 3 sharp knocks hit the apartment door. Lily jumped in my arms. So did I. Nobody spoke afterward. No voice. No threat. Just silence again. Damien slowly approached the door without making a sound. Then his phone vibrated softly inside his coat pocket. He answered immediately, voice low. Talk. I could not hear the response clearly from the bedroom hallway, but I saw Damien's expression darken instantly. How many? He asked sharply. A pause. Then another. Keep them outside, he ordered. Nobody enters this floor. My stomach twisted painfully. Them. Plural. The knock came again. Louder this time. Lily buried her face against my shoulder. Mommy, I am scared. I carried her into the bedroom and set her carefully onto the bed. Stay here no matter what happens, I whispered gently. She grabbed my wrist immediately. Do not leave. The fear in her eyes nearly broke me. I will be right outside the door. Another loud knock shook the apartment. Then a man's voice echoed faintly through the hallway outside. Calm. Almost polite. Mr. Moretti, he called. We only want the ring. Every muscle in my body went cold. Damien did not answer. I stepped back into the hallway. Carefully and found him standing beside the door, one hand resting against the wall while he listened silently. Who are they? I whispered. People who should have stayed buried, he answered quietly. Another voice joined the first outside. This does not concern the woman or the child. Damien actually smiled at that. Not warmly. Dangerously. That is where you are wrong, he said softly. Then he looked toward me. Emily. Something in his voice made my chest tighten instantly. Listen carefully. There is a black SUV in the alley behind this building. If I tell you to run, you take Lily downstairs through the fire escape and do not look back. Panic surged through me immediately. No. I am not leaving you here. The words escaped before I could stop them. Damien stared at me for one long second, surprised. Then another hard knock rattled the apartment door violently enough to shake the frame. Lily cried out softly from the bedroom. Damien's expression changed instantly at the sound. Colder. Sharper. Protective. He stepped away from the door and crossed the apartment toward me in 3 quick strides. Emily, he said quietly, look at me. I did. Nobody touches you or your daughter tonight. The certainty in his voice stole my breath. Then the apartment lights suddenly went out. Darkness swallowed the apartment so completely that for one terrifying second I could not breathe. Lily cried out from the bedroom immediately. Somewhere outside in the hallway, footsteps shifted quickly. Then everything happened at once. Damien grabbed my wrist firmly and pulled me backward away from the front door just as something slammed hard against it from the outside. The old frame rattled violently. Bedroom, he ordered sharply. Now. His voice cut through my panic instantly. I stumbled backward toward Lily's room while Damien moved through the darkness like he already knew every inch of the apartment. Calm. Controlled. The emergency lights from the street below cast faint silver shadows through the rain-covered windows, barely enough to see by. Another crash shook the front door. Lily was sitting upright on the bed when I reached her, tears streaming down her face while thunder rolled outside over Queens. Mommy, she whispered fearfully. I pulled her into my arms immediately. It is okay, I repeated over and over, even though my own voice shook. Then Damien appeared in the bedroom doorway. Rain-gray light caught the sharp edges of his face while distant sirens echoed somewhere downtown. We are leaving, he said calmly. Right now. Another loud impact rattled the apartment behind him. The old lock would not hold much longer. Damien crossed the room quickly and shoved the bedroom window upward. Cold rain and city noise flooded inside instantly. The fire escape leads to the alley, he said. My men are waiting below. I looked down 3 stories at the wet metal stairs disappearing into darkness. My knees nearly gave out. I cannot climb down with Lily in this weather. Damien stepped closer immediately. You can. His eyes locked onto mine steadily. Certain. Unshaken. Somehow that steadied me more than anything else tonight. Behind us, wood splintered near the apartment entrance. Lily whimpered softly against my chest. Damien crouched in front of her carefully despite the chaos around us. Lily, he said quietly, I need you to be brave for your mom, okay? She looked at him with frightened blue eyes. Are you coming too? Something shifted in Damien's expression again. Softer. Human. I am right behind you. He lifted Lily gently into his arms before I could answer. Watching him hold my daughter felt surreal somehow. This dangerous man in an expensive black coat carrying a sleepy 6-year-old through my tiny apartment like protecting her mattered more than anything else in the world. Another crash echoed from the front hallway. Closer now. Damien moved first onto the fire escape, one hand gripping the rain-slick railing while holding Lily securely against his chest with the other. I followed carefully behind them into the storm. Wind whipped freezing rain across my face instantly while the metal stairs groaned beneath our weight. Somewhere below, black SUVs waited beside the alley with headlights glowing through the darkness. Men in dark coats scanned the rooftops and surrounding streets carefully. Damien reached the landing below and handed Lily gently to one of his security men before turning back toward me. Slowly, he called upward over the rain. My hands shook violently gripping the wet railing. Halfway down, my foot slipped suddenly against the metal step. A terrified gasp escaped me as my balance vanished. Then Damien caught me. One arm wrapped around my waist instantly, steady and strong beneath the storm. For one suspended second, neither of us moved. Rain poured around us while Manhattan glowed faintly beyond the alley rooftops. His gray eyes held mine steadily through the darkness. "I told you," he said quietly, "nobody touches you tonight." My heart stumbled painfully against my ribs. Not from fear this time. Then somewhere above us, apartment 3B lights flickered back on while voices echoed through the broken doorway we had escaped only seconds earlier. Damien's expression darkened instantly. He tightened his grip around my arm and guided me quickly toward the waiting SUV. And for the first time since Daniel died, I realized someone dangerous was no longer hunting us alone. Someone even more dangerous had decided to stand in front of us instead.